Okay, welcome everyone. This is 17th of July and it is the Mental Health Advisory Board meeting. And I call the meeting to order and welcome everyone. And thank you for your participation. Julie, would you do the roll call, please?
Sure, I'll go ahead and do it. Corey Tello,
Yes.
Rick Bleichner, Brian Moore, Christine Strauss,
I'm here.
Dan Deneen, Dan's here, Gabby Bonte, Mary Campbell, Lori Walrab,
Here.
Baron Fitzer, Trisha Malott,
Here.
Martha Dittmer,
I'm here.
and Faye Freeman Smith.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Do we have a quorum? I believe we do. Do we have a quorum? I believe we do.
So there's 11. I'm just looking at it now. There's 11.
I thought Mary was going to join us. I never heard Mary Campbell say she was here, but she may be joining us later. And I do want to let everyone know Diane Wolf, who has been a member with us for quite some time, did indicate that she is no longer going to be able to be a member because of her extensive responsibilities at District 87 as the assistant superintendent. So I think we all get that. So we thank her for her service. And do we have any members of the public?
No, Corey.
Okay, thank you. All right. So, we're going to start with the summary report. And well, first of all, let me just say we've got lots to do today, so I'm going to quit jabbering and move us right along. But we need to do a final approval of our bylaws, I believe. We need to look at our proposals that will be going out for agencies and entities to apply for the $553. We need to, and because we definitely want your input into what that RFP document should look like. We need to approve some minutes, and we have a couple of, we have some funding that was allocated about a year ago for some things that we have not yet defined that because of many things that have happened in the interim, and it may be good because now, because of everything that's happened, we may be able to put that toward some functions that will do exactly what we need to be doing at this point, considering the disparities and gaps in our system. So thank you for helping us with all of that. So we'll start with the summary report. Amy, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So the summary report is from calendar year 19, and it just is giving an overview of the data from all of the programs from calendar year 19. And so it's, Corey requested just to show the total number of clients served in each program, and then the overall total for the embedded school program, and then also breaking that down as far as residents and race. You guys can just let me know if you have any questions on any of that data.
And this grew out of all of our concerns, and certainly what, even nationally, but certainly in our area as well, there's been the disproportionate impact of COVID and the economic crises on communities of color. So I really did want all of us to have some real data to put in front of us to see how are we serving, are there populations that we are underserving? And of course, you can only make that, you can only know that is if you also understand the percentage of the population that different subgroups make up. And we do, based on some the most current census information we have, the African American population in McLean County is about 8%, and the Hispanic population is about 5%. So if we kind of factor that into how many we're serving, we can get a sense of are we underserving some groups, and again, what agencies maybe those groups are not particularly choosing to use. And we've also talked that it's very important that we find ways to engage and make welcome every citizen, and we've got to do some really extensive marketing and engagement activities to make sure that the services that are needed feel like they fit for everyone. So that was the purpose of that document. And you will need a magnifying glass, but it's great to have it. Thank you, Amy, for doing that. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that? Okay, moving on. So the next big order of business is we want to look at the funding focus areas and again, these are ones that at our last meeting, you all helped us put together, because again, we wanted to know what are the big categories that the proposals can fit under. And as you know, that every year this is a slight bit agonizing, because the needs are much greater than the available $553. And last year we had about 1.4 million, I think, to allocate. And Amy or Lori, do you have a sense yet what it might be this year, as far as what tax dollars are looking like?
Yeah, so go ahead, Lori.
You go ahead,
Um,
Amy.
So as far as the budget, I got the following numbers from Jessica McKnight. That's in the budget, and then of course it would have to be passed. But as of now, it looks like there's actually significantly more money this coming up in calendar year 21 than there was. So for the Board of Health funding, that doesn't include the funding set aside for recovery courts, is $1,318,635. And then the money that's set aside for recovery courts is $212,392. So it's actually a significant increase for next year than what it was for this year.
So thank you, Amy. And you probably have more inside information about where money is coming from, maybe that would feed into those figures. But if I'm looking at the figures I see on the Finance Committee only, which are just our revenue streams, including the shared income tax, of course we see decreases there. So I don't know if the increases that you're speaking to have to do with some grant funding or federal funding or state funding that are, flowing in because of our situation. So do you happen to know? Because I'm certainly not seeing increases in revenue.
Lori, I'm not 100% sure. So according to Jessica, so this is the money from property tax levy. So this doesn't include any money from any type of other grant or funding. So, but as far as the budget and how there's an increase, that would definitely be our finance department and Jessica. So I was just given the numbers, so I'm not 100% sure how the numbers came from the budget.
Corey, I would think we would need to dig into that, and it's not that, I'm just kind of, unless we're getting money from other sources, I'm just not understanding where an increase is going to come from this year. And we haven't come anywhere close to having budget meetings yet, so, possibly and that would be nice if I was off base there, but I just kind of, have a question in my mind about.
No, I think that's good advice. Thank you. And again, fortunately, today we don't have to do dollar allocations at all. We're not, nearly close to that process. I just wanted people to have a sense of about how much it is. So it looks like, based compared to last year, if this would be accurate, we would have about a $200,000 more than we had last year. But as Lori said, I mean, we definitely need to be careful about that. But just so people have a sense of the total dollars that we have to allocate among, I'm sure, many requests this year. So thank you for that information. And we will definitely be continuing to, ensure that that those numbers are accurate. Okay, so next I'm going to have us look at those funding focus areas, and you will see that based on the input from you and the Board of Health. So we did approve these at the Board of Health meeting last week. And so we decided to make broad categories, realizing that there may be agencies that have, or entities, institutions, whatever, that have never had to seek money before. And so we did want to leave this fairly open-ended, and let people also think in terms of perhaps some collaborations with other agencies, which we've always encouraged, but I think this year we're encouraging even more. And we certainly have seen some good examples of that in our county, thinking about the Housing Alliance that United Way has helped put together, with 6 entities that have come together to make it so much easier for people who have had housing issues as a direct result of COVID, how they can get assistance with just being able to go one place, one form. So again, I really hope that we keep that good example in mind as people submit RFPs to us. We also just want to make sure we cover the gamut from, infants to seniors. And I think we've, tried to do that, and also different levels along the continuum of behavioral health, from, prevention all the way to significant treatment and recovery. So I won't read them to you. You've got them in front of you. And so what I think we want to do today is just see if there's anything in each of these broad categories that you think we should, hone in on, highlight as we start building the RFPs. And so I think I'm going to start with that. If there's anything that comes to your minds right now as far as looking at these 4 categories, is there anything that you really feel within each of them that should be emphasized? So that would be one point that we want input on. And then the second is, keep these in mind as we start going through the RFP document and seeing if we can make that RFP document as understandable and user-friendly, and also that it ties into what we have here. Does that make sense? And so I welcome any comments on the focus areas, and then we'll start looking at the RFP.
Corey, I don't have specifics on the 4 areas. I just wondered about the introductory couple of paragraphs. If in that last paragraph, the last sentence says efforts must be made to reach diverse population of individuals, so forth. which is great. And I wonder if we would somehow want to incorporate some kind of urge to find new ways or better ways to do that. And I'm not sure what the wording like that would look like, and whether, I guess the question is whether we would fund something like that.
Okay, thank you for that, because that is exactly what that dollars I talked about. If you'll look on your agenda, and we can certainly do that out of order. But there was, if you remember, a year ago, and I really think I'm going to credit Dan Deneen with this, because I think Dan was the one that put this out there for us to think about. We talked at a meeting about that whole idea of marketing and navigation. We talked about that. We just know that, like we've talked about, and I think our numbers look at, on that other sheet we just reviewed with the small print, that we are just not reaching some populations. And so, Lori, you're right. We've got to find a way to engage and make them be a better fit in terms of cultural competency, even location, all of those things. So we do want all of you to weigh in today on how might we do that? What if we have a certain amount of dollars? And at this point we had allocated, and this was actually, I believe, coming out of the Board of Health fund balance. We had allocated about $25,000 to build in that marketing function, for lack of a better word. And it's not hiring somebody. That doesn't mean it's going to be a person. It means it's going to be within the behavioral health, under Amy's direction. It would be, and probably in conjunction with health promotion of the health department, it would be, what are the functions that we should be supporting to get the information to the right people in a timely, appropriate fashion. So that answers your question, Lori, long-windedly, sorry. And then the other $25,000, I believe, coming out of the Board of Health fund balance, was to do some sort of a help for agencies and entities right now in how they can be more self-sustaining. Because as we've talked about all along, we always hope that any services we fund, that people who are applying for it are also thinking about other funding streams and other ways to be sustainable over time, so that we can help more programs and entities. So the other $25,000 was to kind of work with entities to help them find ways to be more sustainable. That could be by enlisting the aid of those agencies that are best at doing that, and having them maybe kind of be a mentor or kind of a little bit of a, trainer of trainers for other entities. Or it can be looking at research from around the country on what have other places done, or in the state, what have other 708 boards or other regions done to help with sustainability. So again, I'm being long-winded, but we do want to talk about both of those things today. Does that help answer your question, Lori? All right. Okay. So, so does anyone else have any comments about the 4 general areas? Anything they want to emphasize within them?
Corey,
Yes.
okay. I just want to comment, because you posed the question of whether we should narrow the focus or hone in on any of the specifics within the description of the 4 categories. And my inclination is actually perhaps to go the other direction, to keep them broad, or even make, I'm thinking of one in particular, to even make it a little bit more broad, to capture some of the entities in our community that are maybe doing really great things to address mental health, or capturing diverse populations, but wouldn't naturally fit into some of more specific language. So as one example, I like that we broadened the description for crisis services, and that it provides other examples. And so people maybe think a little bit outside the box. With regard to youth services, and this is actually one of the ones that I'm thinking of, we have entities and programs and agencies that are running in our community that are capturing lower socioeconomic statuses, individuals from different parts of the community, different races and ethnicities, but aren't necessarily what would be considered a mental health organization, but they have programs that are addressing the mental health of youth. And so as I was reading youth services, my thought is to perhaps suggest that we make sure that it is broad enough that entities that are addressing mental health and capturing diverse populations have an opportunity to possibly apply, where we haven't made it so narrow that they're automatically ruled out. So that's just one of my thoughts as I started looking through the 4 specific areas.
I think that was indeed our intent to broaden them. So thank you for that. Yeah. And I do think we are hoping for some non-traditional people or entities to apply. And I think we're also hoping that, like I said, we might even, I would love it if there could be partnerships between more traditional and non-traditional entities, coming together, or however that might go. So Tricia, is there anything in the language that you think is closing something off that we should be attending to?
It's more that I think I mean, it may come down to how it's specifically worded in the RFP for this particular category. I mean, so that final language may be where ultimately that's where the language is most important, because it's going to come down to interpretation. I mean, could I potentially interpret they will be geared toward providing short and long-term mental health care prevention and awareness to younger individuals as open and broad? Yes. But if I also put it in the context of what has typically been awarded, or agencies that typically apply, I may automatically exclude myself if I run one of those other programs. And so that's where I'm thinking we may want to make sure that we have more broad inclusive language. And that may even just be that we explicitly state, this may include programs that include mental health being incorporated into services for children in other capacities or something.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. And I agree with you. Let's move right now to the request for proposal. And you're right, if you would help us really, make sure the language of that is doing what we're suggesting that we do want it to be, encouraging to entities that are doing great work with underserved. So, okay, so I'm going to have everybody, if you would, grab your document that was in your packet, that is the request for proposal forms, I should say, and not quite sure, don't want to go through this word by word. So I maybe will just ask first for general comments. I'm hoping that you've already read through it. So I'll throw out.
Corey, this is Christine. I just wanted to draw the attention to the adult services section quickly.
Okay.
I know this was an issue the last time we met as far as specifics regarding ages, but this says adult services for individuals who are 21 years of age of older. I think that we probably all agree on that 21 is too high to be identified as an adult. And if we don't agree, then please inform me why.
Thank you. I think
That's
that
maybe
was
something I don't understand.
No, I think that was a good catch. I think the reason why, I think we were trying to be clear between the youth and the adult, but you're right. Certainly the age of majority for many things is 18, but under some of the youth service laws, it goes up to the day before the 22nd birthday for those who have, disabilities or special needs. So I think
Right.
that's how you got caught, but you make an excellent point that we do need to think about what we do with that. And what I think we were hoping is we didn't want to force people to have to feel like they have to submit to both if they are serving that population. So we'll have to, so thank you. We need to attend to that. So are you
Yeah,
suggesting?
that absolutely.
Yeah.
I understand the conversation that we had and how some people were saying last time and not wanting to do an RFP, but if we're talking about agencies that don't provide youth services and they do provide only adult services, I think that we are now excluding individuals from 18 to 20 years of age. So I understand the purpose behind not wanting the overlap, but it also is important to not now eliminate people 18 years to 20.
I cannot, that is an excellent point. So, okay, so we probably do need to alter that to be who are 18 years of age or older. And we'll kind of figure out what we do about that, people with special needs.
Can I
Okay.
just add to that real quickly too?
Sure.
I was thinking like if there's separate programs, so it makes sense for the youth, like you're saying, Corey, the 21 and under for, because right, adult, I'm just wondering also if it's considered an adult service within that agency, do we even want to put the age on it? Because even 18, we could be eliminating some. So for example, currently adult psychiatry with CHS, they serve youth in that program from the ages of 12 and up.
Yeah.
So for the psychiatry roles, the 12 and up, then you don't have to, they're able to do that. So then if we put on there 18 and up, then we're eliminating, even though it's adult psychiatry, then we're eliminating those. So I'm just wondering if, I don't know the correct answer, but I'm just wondering if we need to necessarily put that age restriction on there, or if in the RFP we can also for adult, we can specify what are the ages for this program and why and how would you define them into the adult population?
Okay. Yes, I guess I just will make a note to all of you that we will make sure that we address that and find a good way to phrase that in adult services. So thank you for pointing that out. Okay. And I agree with you, Amy, that should be reflected in the RFP too. So, okay, so moving into the RFP, if there's no other comments for the funding focus areas. Again, I'm just going to throw out, as people have read through this, any general comments or any things you noted in here that give you pause or make you feel like something's been omitted or something is not worded properly. And Amy, I'm guessing timelines, obviously timelines were from, a year ago. I don't know. And today is, we've had a timeline that you've all been, you've had for a while. And I don't know how much that timeline is going to have to be adjusted, Amy, because of budget unknowns. Are you feeling like we're going to try to stick with the initial timeline that you provided?
Yeah, I think we're good for the timeline. So the RFP will, so I did use last year's RFP just so we could kind of dissect it and see what we wanted to add, change, whatever. And so I didn't spend time I wanted to keep those dates just to kind of show the flow from last year. But as far as the timeline this year, we're good on following through. And And so the RFP will go out like between August 10th and August 15th. And as far as the funding from the board meetings, it was decided not to, unless you guys want to discuss differently, it was decided not to put an amount on each of the four funding focus areas like we did last year. So like last year when we put like 200,000 for said service, X amount of contracts could be awarded. During one of the last meetings, it was said not to do that. So we don't need to know the exact amount of money at this point to allow the RFPs and the application, the bidding process to continue.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not hearing from any of you that there's any language in this under each of the categories that the scope of, I will bring you back to scope of service on page 3. You know, every year we talk about to keep this from being so labor intensive for everyone, you know, starting fresh almost every year with whether the contract should be awarded for more than 1 year. Should we move to a multi-year contract? We've talked about that for at least 5 years. And you'll notice that we are keeping it again this year for an initial period of 1 year. We also talked about, should there be certain ones that we just know are so critical, are so essential for the meat of a behavioral health system in the county that we should not. So Laura, you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I'm looking for, and I don't know if there's going to be another document or what, how do we, is there a place where it talks about the criteria which we're going to use to some degree to evaluate? I said program evaluation and reporting requirements, but to make it a little more clear what how we're going to be ranking these, I guess.
Amy, do you want to talk about, part of that is the application review information on page 5, but Amy, I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
Sure, I can look at that and look at adding more specific language. And then I would just also be, sorry, I was taking notes on that. And I also would just be careful on being like too specific as far as like, there's a grading matrix and this is how we're using it. I could put that in there for sure, but then just because, and what we found out last year, just because one agency maybe scored higher on a competing other program doesn't mean that that's the agency that has to be awarded the funding. So the grading matrix was a tool to be used in the process, but it didn't have to, it doesn't have to be how it doesn't have to be how the funding is awarded. And the other thing too, I'm wondering like the huge difference between this year and last year is there was more competition last year because of saying awarded 1 program or 2 programs per funding focus area, and this was the total amount. But this year, if we're not doing that, and so if you have more than one agency apply for the same programming or similar programming, it doesn't necessarily have to be picking one over the other, if that makes sense.
I would think if I'm an agency looking to see what kind of priorities we're looking for, I think it would be good to be, and maybe we are somewhere, I don't know, more explicit in what we're, you know, in the qualities of the program that we're looking for, not necessarily the services per se, but you know, that maybe we're looking for best able to be, you know, reach out into the communities that we're asking for, or, and I'm not wording this very well, or, being innovative, being able to be more collaborative, or those kind of things. And say, those were, and I don't recall exactly our tool, but, how we are scoring those things, but, give them give them some guidance and hopefully some avenue to think broadly about how they're delivering services, not so much as to what the services are, but how they're doing it. So we can, so maybe they will, think along those lines a little better or more.
Then I think that this would be a good time then to discuss some of those expectations in the programming. So then I know what to put in the RFP as far as we're looking for diversity. What does that look like? What does outreach look like? To put that in the RFP, and then also to then follow through with those expectations in the application and then in the grading matrix. So it would be helpful to me to know more of those expectations that would be outlined in that.
I think it's in that second paragraph to some degree, in the very beginning. It just may be a matter of making it clarifying or emphasizing.
I agree with the need for simplicity and guidance. If for agencies who are not familiar with the process or the language, how do we help them be a part of, if they wanted to submit an RFP, understand what we're asking in them developing their RFP? Is there someone, is it Amy that they will call if they have questions about language? What do you mean by this? Or helping them to understand, do they qualify? Is there a process put in place for agencies who will not understand that what you're asking for?
So Faye,
Yeah, this is Christine. I agree with,
sorry, Christine, go ahead.
go ahead, Amy.
Oh, I would say,
Okay, this is just,
go ahead.
I just want to back up really quick what Faye said. I just want to back that up a little bit. For example, I'm just looking at the specialty court section, and it says here that the programs provided, and then names specialized therapy programs. What essentially are we talking about? What does that encompass? Because if other agencies can, and I know it's an established program, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have room for improvement. What does specialized therapy include? What type of case management? I mean, are we talking emotional, what specific therapies are we looking at here that other agencies could potentially apply for the RFP?
So just to piggyback off what Christine and Faye was saying, so in the RFP, it will list me as the contact person for questions, just to help keep it streamlined, and also to make sure I'm not part of the deciding factor on any of the programs. And so then that way they're not reaching out to someone that would be a decision maker. But the other piece of that too is then if we can make the language as clear as possible to help, agencies feel like they don't have to ask a lot of questions. I mean, we're not going to avoid asking questions, but just making sure the language is clear as possible. So like what Christine was saying, if they're looking at specialized therapy, like what could that mean or whatever.
Amy, at one time, the person, in your position used to host an actual opportunity for any entity that wanted to apply to just come and get some guidance. Are you thinking that might be a more efficient way to have people get their questions answered, as opposed to each of them having to call you one by one? Is that something that might be considered? And again, it could be done virtually if we still are worried about COVID.
And I think that is something that we can look at. We didn't do that last year. And I know there was, I and I don't know a lot about what, the process my predecessor used, but we didn't do that last year and I didn't have a lot of questions either. So it was pretty clear cut. And then and the other thing that I would be concerned about that is like, how do we decide who we invite? So then there's so many.
So can I jump in here maybe, Amy?
Sure.
The process that I used to see when I worked at the city of Bloomington, and I'm guessing they still use this process because they used it for many years, was to have on the RFP a date which we would have a group meeting. Of course, could have that certainly remotely, where any and all potential bidders could come in and join a conference call, and maybe through the chat function or something, submit their questions, and then they would all hear the same answers. And because I'm very concerned that, there's always the potential that somebody gets information that somebody else doesn't get. And really the information should be the same for all of them. And we don't have to decide to invite people. We just put the date out there and say, if you like to hear the questions or you have questions to ask and have answered, and then, it's not just you alone, Amy, I suppose, because there may be other people who need to or can or want to weigh in or can weigh in on it, I suppose. And we can talk about exactly how to structure that, but I just feel like it should be an open process that everybody has access to the same questions and answers.
I agree. I think that will work. And on the back end of that, if people can eliminate themselves based on the questions that they ask early, so it would help to tighten up the RFPs that are coming in, because they understand more accurately what you're asking for.
We can definitely do that and look into that. The other thing too, I think it would still be appropriate to, like, as they're doing the application, maybe questions don't come up on the front end. Those questions then would be posted to our website with the answers. So then that way, if someone asks a question and they get that information, that question would be answered for all of them to view. So then not one is getting more information than the other.
So you would have a frequently asked questions document, basically. Yeah.
Yep.
Great. Sounds good.
And then the other thing too, I think that one of the things our RFP is missing, just because I love the way that Faye is thinking, because it doesn't make sense for an agency or for us to use a lot of time to complete an application, and then it's something that doesn't fit into the process. And so these are very time consuming especially for the agencies. And then it's time consuming for the board members to review those, to decline them based off of some logistic. So I feel like maybe in the RFP process, or in the RFP that we don't really have in there, like, what are things that will not qualify an agency for funding? So we have like nonprofit. It seems too open right now, as far as it's like, well, if you're a nonprofit, you can apply. But like, what are some other things that would be beneficial to list as as far as like eligibility requirements for funding? What would be some other things that we would want to look at?
Well, certainly that they're using evidence-based, assessments and tools of treatment and interventions. But Amy, what is on the matrix? I think we were remiss in not having sent out a copy of the matrix with our agenda too.
The matrix is just, so the application, and you're correct, so the application is broken down into the different areas. So it's broken down into like program history, project description, objectives, is broken down, collaboration, financial management is broken down. The application is broken down into those different areas. And then the grading matrix has each area is worth the same amount of points. And then the grading matrix is just based on, has a Rubik's scale, I'm not saying that right, based on each of those areas. But I think that that's something also that maybe during the next behavioral health policy and funding committee to look more at that grading matrix, because there was discussion last year too on maybe that needing revamped a little bit.
But again, today is a great day to get your input on what what Amy's asking, what should we really be being very, very clear on what we're looking for. And certainly we want, like we said, we want the agency to prove that they are, evidence-based, and they are, and that they have financial stability behind them. So we know that they will be able to carry out whatever, they agree to be able to do.
Corey, I don't know if you're looking for, I might be way off base here by this, but I think agencies might want to discuss or identify what clinicians will be providing the services, make sure those clinicians are qualified that will be applying, giving the direct services. I think that's really important. I know there's agencies that of course are out there that they have one supervisory clinician and then they have essentially underqualified people providing the services and having others sign off on it. That's just the nature of the beast when it comes to some of these mental health services and underfunded agencies. So I think not only what type of treatment do they do, what are the clinicians that are providing the direct services, are those clinicians qualified, what kind of experiences does the agency have providing those services. I think those, and it can be done very briefly to even be looked into further or not, very briefly identify what those clinicians or those qualifications are, and then exclude people or include people, not people, but agencies based on that.
Yes, thank you. And we do ask for a history of the agency to, show that it is, has a longstanding reputation of delivering, with fidelity and all of that. So yes, thank you. But your point about the clinician qualification is important.
Corey, on bottom of page 2, we already have a list of some agency requirements, and maybe it's that section that could be altered and maybe beefed up or made more specific as to what exactly the requirements are. And maybe because I think it says assign only legally authorized provider representatives to provide services, which sort of sounds like what you were just saying. I think it was, sorry, seeing your picture. So
Christine,
so maybe that could be reworded, and we can add to this list or clarify it somehow.
thank you. Good.
That.
So I want to go back to Lori's point about giving the information or some context ahead of time about what we're going to be expecting of agencies. Are we looking for that it's an innovative program? Are we looking for collaboration? And I'm not saying that these are exactly what we're looking for, but I think it's important for us to provide that guidance to Amy, and Amy identified she'd like to know that today, and whether that's specific to each funding area or as a whole, that we identify that up front. Because if we on the back end are going to have the expectation that agencies do X, Y, and Z, we should be communicating that ahead of time. I would add, and some of this may be in some of the additional documents that regularly go out that are technically links from this RFP, but not visible right now. And so, sorry. And, so thinking through, do they have to submit a sustainability plan? So do they have to identify how they're going to do this on an ongoing basis? I would say that might be an important piece to consider if that's not already something that's requested, and I can't recall from last year.
It is on there. Sustainability is on there.
Okay.
Well, I
but then-
agree with the need for understanding the overall tone in applying for it. Is it a focus, given the RFP on COVID, under the youth issues or et cetera, as an example? So at the beginning, to help people understand, should I even try with to apply for RFP if I'm not involved in the overall tone of where the direction that the health department is going with considering RFPs? Because if you apply and then you're rejected at the end, and it's because you didn't address an area that was a focus for the health department, and I'm just talking overall, then I would guess that people would say, I didn't know that in the beginning, because what I'm talking about does address that area. So to be clear on the overall focus is area. So if the health department is really looking at disparities, should that be in there at the beginning? And we have said some of that. So I agree with what you're saying is what I'm talking about.
Well, and I would add like one more item to kind of this part of the discussion, that I think we need to define disparities or diversity, or however we're going to put it in there. What is our expectation of that? Is that X percentage of the clients served will fall within X percentage of the poverty level? Is it X percentage are not Caucasian? So I think if we're going to provide that so far we've talked about it more in a generality, but in the context of this, do we want to make sure that they're demonstrating how they're going to reach different populations or different groups within our community? Is it that they're serving this zip code and not that zip code? So I think defining that will be important, rather than just listing it as a sort of a broad term as what we're looking for.
I agree, because that ensures that the monies is being spent in areas that we are focusing on. So to clarify that.
Yeah, and what is interesting is that, most of the things we currently fund, just as a way to try to think through this, they are open to any resident in the county. So again, it's how we talk about, are we thinking that they're going to create like a program within a program that is geared again for certain subpopulations, because it's really only embedded schools that we have actually, they actually serve very specific zip codes by how we awarded, different schools getting the service. But the rest of them are open to anyone in the county at all times. But I hear what you're saying, but these are really good for us to have to really think about how to be very clear in our definitions. Some of it may even be, do we offer more mobile services? Do we offer services that are current, but do we offer them in a different location? Again, either through some sort of a mobile device, or through some sort of a satellite location, or in conjunction with another entity that already exists in an area that has typically been underserved. I've been thinking a lot about, as I learn more about what Mid-Central Community Action is doing right now, and the number of people that are walking in, are connecting with that entity to get all sorts of support. It seems like that would be a logical entity for someone to think about. Should there be some services located near that entity, so that people that are seeking one could be close to, doing it where it's more convenient. Just ideas like that are coming to mind for me. So does that help make sense of what you're wanting us to think about? Does that?
I think so. That to make sure that we are specifying access and need, if we're looking at that broadly, and to look at COVID, if it's going to be next year, the whole year that we're considering that, should we also include that some way in the RFP if we're addressing those areas? Do we want the agencies out there to also indicate how they're going to be sustaining their services through COVID? How would it look when you talk about innovation?
So Faye, you talking about like doing things virtually, maybe? Is that what you're talking about?
Well,
Or
virtually,
give us some examples.
yeah, like virtually, but some people don't have the mobile access or the computer access. So what would you do for those people that don't have the funding for that? Will you provide them the mobile access to come in, or would you do the face-to-face, and how would you do it to make sure they're safe?
Can I just quickly add to that, Faye? With that, then I think that is a really great point about COVID. And I think we need to then look at the budget allocation within that program. Are we, as far as like technology, is that something that we can help with those underserved populations? Is helping ensure, like if it needs to be mobile to keep them safe, can we help ensure that they have access to that? The clients have access to that to help support the programs and providing those services.
Also, I think if we're looking out at really providing services across our entire county, it's my understanding that a lot of, and some of you may experience this, that in the rural areas, there's just not very good broadband connections. So, that's a slightly separate issue than people not being able to afford the technology. And so looking at maybe zip codes probably does not only geographic distribution around the county, but also may help us. And I don't know if you can use the 4-digit extension on a zip code to better hone in on underserved areas or areas that are, financially have tougher situation going on. So I'd like to see us look at it maybe somehow like that as well.
The interesting, and I agree that this is exactly what we need to be talking about right now, but I'm also thinking, if we devoted a chunk of money towards just getting the technology infrastructure set up, there's not, that's going to take away from the services, and yet the services can't be delivered unless there's that infrastructure. So I'm thinking too that needs to be us partnering with, towns and municipal things, and just really looking at what are all the ways that technology infrastructure, where other funders could come in to help us with that, because again, the schools have learned what it takes, the amount of time, because not only do you provide the technology, you also then have to provide the training for how to use the technology. You also have to help provide the troubleshooting. You have to sometimes provide the manpower for people to go in and set up the technology. And like I said, troubleshoot it when it doesn't work. So, that is a whole infrastructure that I'm not sure that if we start using these dollars for that, then where's the treatment? So I think that's something that we need to be partnering with others to help decide on that. And I'm thinking about having had a conversation with Scott Hogan, the Director of Special Education for Tri-County, which services, many of the rural school districts in this county and 2 others. They have done amazing things. They have actually gone in and helped create whole rural areas to have what they call, I think it's called Wi-Fi community or something. So they haven't just like tried to wire one house at a time, one user at a time. They've tried to create like a hub for a whole area. And so, we need to also find out where have those hubs been set up that we could then, because then we could use it for the therapy piece as well as the education piece. So again, there's a lot of pieces we should be putting together before we think this money should be allocated just for the technology. Does that make sense?
Corey, can we though, and just encourage the agencies that are going to submit RFPs to bring forth their solution, potential solutions or their existing solutions, and sort of reward by to some degree prioritizing those, and let them figure out. I don't know why we have to do those things. We let them bring them forward.
Well,
And-
and I'm even wondering, sorry, Corey, I was just gonna say, all of this discussion has also made me think, given the situation with COVID, and while I would really hope that we don't have to go back phases in our county and go back to true pure shelter in place, do we need to keep that in mind as we issue this RFP? And should a requirement of this year's RFP be agencies providing a contingency plan about how they're going to continue to fulfill that service, even if we have to shelter in place again? Because that then also addresses all of this potential discussion. And like Lori said, it also puts some of that responsibility back on the agency to identify what they would need in order to do that. And then our award is based on what that need is. And I think it's then good for us to know, and for them to think through how they're going to address that if we, have times like March and April and May again. So.
For sure, everybody needs a plan A and a plan B, if not a plan C. With plan C being a hybrid of plan A and plan B. So you're right, that people have, and I'm assuming, I'd like to assume that every entity is having those discussions and has already been having them because they kind of had to do it. But you're right, it does need to be spelled out so we know that it really is a plan that has meat behind it.
Mhm.
This is Christine again, and please, Corey, cut me off if I am 100% off base here. So if we're talking about specificities and things we're going to put, not only what we're expecting from agencies, someone mentioned fiduciary responsibility or fiduciary backing, and my thought that pops into my head is if we are saying, I was recently presented a contract by a completely different government agency to review. So this is just popping into my head because it's fresh in my mind. But at no point did they include in that contract saying that if they stop funding for me, that I'm still responsible for providing those services. And I think something like that eliminates smaller private practices or independent agencies that are not as big as, let's say, the hospitals or Chestnut Health Services. And it eliminates those who may be qualified and specialized to provide services that are being put out for the request for proposals. If they're required to say, oh, guess what, I have 50 grand in the bank to offer these services for the next 6 months if the funding stops from the county. Does that make sense?
So you're kind of,
It's Mary.
go ahead.
Well, I've been listening to this. I had to be in Peoria this morning, so I listened to this whole conversation on the phone until I just got back to the house. But I would agree with that last comment, because what I was hearing was the desire on the part of the committee to try to reach out and do non-traditional or innovative approaches to solving the problems. And the specificity and the level of requirement of the grant, those two things don't often, they collide with each other often. So there's a difficulty for, I was thinking as we were coming back, I was thinking about, I think it's called, it's a little program that provides services for men coming out of prison or out of the county courts. And when you expect the level of grant writing requirement, you're really narrowing yourself down to a few agencies who have professional grant writers on staff. For the most part, it becomes very difficult for any of those smaller, the ones that often serve the minority population, that often serve the most disenfranchised. And so I just wanted to throw that in there to add that to our conversation, to be thinking about who we immediately will rule out and who we will be ruling in by the language and by, for example, another one that I apologize, I had these all in my head as we were coming back, but the term specialty courts, and it may be because I don't have a history with this committee, but maybe that's all you want to serve. But if you look at the language, it eliminates any individual who wasn't blessed by getting into a specialty court, who's still coming out of the county jail, who still is likely to return. I mean, the specialty courts can only serve a very few people. They do a great job, and I think we should be funding them, but I think we also are eliminating, by calling it that title, we're eliminating all of those individuals who just aren't picked to be in a specialty court. And so I just wondered if a broader title, because you were talking about broader categories, if a broader title for that category 4 might be considered. So that was all I wanted to throw in there. Thank you.
Yeah, Mary, you raise a great point, but Lori might be able to help here too. But my understanding is there is a long-term commitment between the county board and the 553 board that the specialty courts will be funded in perpetuity. That was something that was an agreement that was made years ago, and it continues as. And again, Lori, unless you can shed different light on it.
I might have a different, I don't know the inside detail on that you're referring to, and I know what you're speaking to, I believe, but I don't know the detail on it. And I think I have a somewhat different take for myself personally, and I don't know what support it would get from the county board, but and that may be the case. Maybe we've agreed that certain providers are going to do just these things for the court, and that's just the way it's going to be. So I would say if that's the case, if this is not a competitive bid situation, then just carve that money out and give it to them. Because why make anybody think that they're going to get that money, first of all? Second of all, and we could still hold their feet to the fire to perform in certain ways through a contract agreement. Then if we wanted, and I really appreciate what Mary was saying, if we want to be able to do things outside of that context, then that's what we should be putting in number 4, for people released from jail or prison, to reintegrate them into our community and fund that separately. And it may be a whole lot less money than the specialty courts are getting, but perhaps even serve a broader community. I don't know. But I think if we're just going to hand people money because that's the agreement, then why send it out for bid?
Look, Lori, this is Christine. What you're talking about, this is what we talked about on our last meeting, where I wanted to encourage the inclusion of that last piece of continuity of care for those who are released from jail and prison, and the continuity of psychiatric and mental health care, because that's not covered in specialty court. That's absolutely something completely different. And we're talking about individuals who are incarcerated, whether they're in the jails or whether they're in the prisons. So that's why I was trying to, encourage putting it into that adult section, which I do see that that's still in there today. So I'm glad to see that. Going on what Mary's statement is that the contradictory message of, hey, we need to provide these services for people, but we might not be backing some of these smaller requests for funding if they don't have the backing. And Mary, I don't know what program you're specifically discussing, but it made me think of Job Partnerships Joy Care is a Bloomington Normal program for reintegration for individuals coming out of prison. They are not funded by anything else but private donations. So that's another organization that for myself personally has been extremely beneficial, backing my offenders coming out into the community and gaining them stability and encouraging them to be productive members of society. And if we say, you can't, again, with Mary's point of they don't have these as a volunteer organization, and how do you put this request for proposal together? How do you make them show that they have financial backing to provide these services if for some reason funding gets eliminated? I think that, again, Mary just exemplified the point, saying we need to include some of these agencies that don't have the ability to the extent of which some of our larger funded programs and agencies do.
Yeah, that was not the one I was thinking of, but that is a good example. It's called Seeds of Hope. It's under a program called Encouraging Word Outreach. They are under the Illinois Prairie Community Foundation. They do have a 501. I suspect that maybe Joy Care might as well. But yeah, I'm always concerned when we put things out and only those who've always, what do they say? If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. And I think that, somebody in an agency might be creative and innovative. I think that's possible. But I also think there's a lot of small entities that would have a great deal of difficulty with the requirements, not of doing what they say they'll do, but of even writing the grant, the level required. And I liked that idea earlier of having a meeting. I think Lori mentioned that, that they do that at the county, and that apparently it had been done in the past, but have it where everybody can come in, have a couple of folks there, you all who know a lot of this language, and let people come and ask. And then sometimes I've seen it in other cities where they've actually provided supportive services for small not-for-profits to help them in that grant preparation process. And I've seen that in other cities, and it's been very successful. So I just want to consider that possibility.
Go ahead, Lori.
So I'm wondering, going back to that, Mary, that was really interesting to hear, actually. But going back to the specialty courts piece, maybe we need to clarify what the agreement is, or how, are there competitors in that field, and make that a separate, if there is competition to get in there, make it a separate piece than this, and just put it out for specialty court bidding.
Lori, I would love it. I have been asking that. I have been on this committee for a long time, or this procedure for a long time. I've been asking that every single year, that we could come to some conclusion about that, something definitive. But Amy, I thought it was interesting that today you actually, when you gave numbers, you actually said that you actually had the $200,000 amount that was separate from the other amount you said that you and Jessica talked about. And so it almost seems like, has somebody done that? Because that's the first time I've ever seen there be two different amounts talked about, where the specialty court money was put out there separate.
So it's been that way on the health department's budget, the lines, and the different fund balances or fund codes. And I know I'm not using the exact correct language that the finance department would be using right now, but there is a separate line that is specific to specialty courts. And then there's another specific line that is specific to Board of Health funding. But I think it looks like historically those two numbers were just added together.
Right.
To
That's
show.
always come out, that's always come out of the big pot
But-
of behavioral health.
Right.
stuff.
But in the budget, it is separated. But then I also agree with Lori, and we talked about this before, with like specialty courts. If we put out a bid specific to specialty courts, there isn't any competition. There's only court services that is going to apply for it. And then talked about there's an agreement somewhere. So I agree that it can be misleading to other agencies if there's this 4 funding focus areas, but only one place can apply for one funding focus area, and there isn't any competition. So I think it brings up a lot of good points.
I will tell you the reason why it ended up being titled specialty courts is for that very reason, because within that behavioral funding policy group that you all have been participating in, that standing committee, we had the same exact discussion and said it does seem unfair, for lack of a better word, to pretend that it's something other than it is. And so that's how we arrived at, let's just call it specialty courts, because if we must pay for specialty courts, which is what we have been told for years and years that we must, then let's be honest about it and be very clear about it. So that's exactly why this category is labeled specialty courts. So Lori, I would so welcome if you want to try to tackle that from a new, fresh eyes.
I guess what I'll say is this not the, let me ask this question. This is the Board of Health RFP process, is it not?
But there is a, believe me, I've been down this road. There is a standing commitment.
And
in
that,
that said,
can we not commit to it separately outside of this specific process here and just say, here, we commit X, whatever in this way. And if it has to be, if we want to have or if we're asked to competitively bid it out, we can do that under a separate RFP process. And then just the mega people who can bid on that can do it, organizations, and won't waste anybody else's time. And we're very upfront about how this works. And if it's just one organization that is going to do it and can do it, then we just award it to them. I mean, this is just, I think we have say in how I would hope that the Board of Health has say in how the process works, even though the funding may be a done deal. If it's a done deal, we need to be transparent about it and upfront about it.
it has come, and Dan has been, I know Dan, I don't know if you want to say something. I know Dan has kind of tried this as well. I would be I totally welcome you're looking into this, Lori. If you can find a different way to do it, it has never been able, I mean, it seems very entrenched. And so again, I welcome a better way to do it.
I'm not sure who to go to ask this question. If it's not the Board of Health putting out this RFP, I mean, I'm assuming that we're advising the Board of Health. The Board of Health, if it's not them, I'm not sure who is controlling this process. So maybe you and I need to have a separate conversation about
And
this.
I would say the health committee, that might be a good conversation to have with the health committee of the Board of Health, or of the county board, because that's where some of this comes through. And we basically have been told that if we do not allocate monies for it, it will still come out of our budget one way or another. So
I'm not arguing that. See, I wouldn't argue that point. I would just argue the process. So
again, I welcome your help in.
Yeah, I agree with Lori and Corey. If this allocated already, it's a grant. They don't have to request the funds. It's not an RFP. So we need to probably clear up that language that it's a grant rather than an RFP.
Okay, thank you. That I do not disagree at all. So thank you. So we will continue to try to get more clarity on that. But I think that's how it got to be exactly what it says right now, is that was the attempt at clarity, but we'll keep.
So that would make sense then to me if we're looking at the way that it's written in that RFP, these sections here, that would make sense to me why when we brought up the issue earlier, I brought up the issue earlier about getting more specific about what these specialized treatments mean, what is, getting more definitive of what it means and what services are technically being put out to bid, that if this is already agreed upon money, but an agreement that's not part of, you know what I mean, that the agreement that it's not in writing agreement, I don't know, I'm not familiar with it, but that would make sense why it's not specific if this is not open for other providers to be able to participate in the bid process.
Yes, Dan, did you want to say something? Dan, you've got your thing on. Do you want to say something? Dan, if you're talking, we're not hearing you.
While we're waiting for Dan to come in, I would just wonder then, are we going to still have a category 4 that addresses the issue of mental health of people who are who are being released from jail and prison, and what would we call that? And would that not allow people with specialty court to apply if we carve out a section just for specialty court? Would that allow funds to go to a broader range of some of our community-based programs, the Alliance for the Mentally Ill, we've talked about that, and certainly the other couple that have been brought up.
Well, and I think that if you will notice, and no, that's a great question, Mary, but I think you will notice that that is also partly why in the adult service section, it was added continuity for psychiatric and mental health service post-incarceration and release. So that is under that, we did add that in to adult services. And I would also say these were adopted by the Board of Health at last week's Board of Health meeting. So I don't know that the categories at this point are going to change unless we, totally backtrack the process. But part of what your issues that all of you have been raising is, I believe if we thought the specialty courts is what it is, and then we should say so, which we did by the name, but then under adult services, we added in that last sentence there under psychiatric and mental health service post-incarceration and release to be able to meet some of the needs you are speaking to. So does that help?
Absolutely, and I forgot that was there, so thank you. That absolutely meets that request.
Thank you, good. Christine, did you want to, Dan, I wish we could figure out a way to know if Dan's trying to talk to us. Okay, so this is wonderful conversation, and you're highlighting some things that have been that we keep trying to deal with that one issue, and here it is again. But that is exactly why specialty courts was labeled as it is. So, but what other criteria would you like to see? As Lori pointed out on page 2, under the agency requirements, are there other things that we should be capturing? Everything you've all mentioned is wonderful. I love making sure that they can articulate their plans for if they need to go to remote services and how they would be able to prove that they can do that and maintain a caseload, and how we're defining disparities. And I think the question about innovation, and Trish and Lori, I would ask you both to weigh in on this. One of the things that has just kind of run past me, I don't know that it's anything more.
Corey, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just see, because you were talking to Dan just posted a message on a chat. So I wanted to make sure that you saw that. He said, my mic isn't working. My comments are that we're lucky to avoid an increase in, we're lucky to avoid an increase in drug court mental health contribution and should try to cut it back, although prioritizing persons in the criminal system. Do you see that? It's in there's a little bubble at the top of our screen, and it's a chat bubble. And he put a message in there.
I can't see his message. You must have special powers, Christine.
Okay.
I see it, Christine. I think, and you just read it. So I'm not, Dan, maybe you can, for me, I need to clarify what you mean by we were lucky to avoid an increase in drug court.
Dan, can you call in? So if your mic's not working on the computer, if you go to the login information, there's a number where you can call. And then if you call in, you just use your phone and we would be able to hear you.
And in the interest of time, since we're almost out and we haven't gotten much done, I'm freaking out here. The innovation issue is something that, again, it's perhaps just my perception, and help me, Tricia and Lori, but there has been some discussion that the the 2-cent sales tax, which I'm sure has been decimated by COVID to some degree, was going to be the money that was more for innovation, and that was going to be the money that kind of that answered to you, Tricia, and the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council, and that was meant to be for the more innovative kinds of things. And our $553 was meant more to be kind of those pieces that just are, again, those core essential pieces that have to be in place in order to make sure that people are safe and have access to core services. So do you know anything about that distinction?
Yeah, yes and no. In that I'm more familiar with the distinction with the shared sales tax, since that's what falls under my purview. A little less with the exact distinction of the $553 and what guidelines apply to that. I guess my interpretation of 553 is maybe a little bit different, and I don't think it prevents or prohibits innovation. And so I think that's where, as an advisory board, we have, I would say, I think we have the discretion to identify whether that's something that we want to encourage in the RFPs or not, in what's accomplished. And so I don't know that I think innovative in this context has to be completely delineated between the two funding sources.
So
I
it's
just
not-
think if we're going,
Not either or. It's not an either or. Yeah. Okay.
at least not in my opinion, no. I don't think there's, my interpretation and my understanding of the $553 has never been that it cannot fund something innovative. Whereas there is more of a distinction for the shared sales tax. So.
Thank you.
And I would add to that we're not necessarily talking about, we might be talking about innovative programs, but it's also innovation on how the programs are delivered. And I think we're fine asking for that.
Thank you. So noted. Yeah, I'm great with that. Okay. Anything else under agency requirements? And then I'm going to move us, if people can give me about 15 more minutes of their time, I would really appreciate it, because I would like to move us very quickly to input on those two functions that I talked about earlier, marketing and helping with agencies, entities being sustainable. So any other comments under agency requirements? So now I think we've got innovative, collaborative, clearly defined disparities, clearly defined plans for delivery of services in multiple ways.
Can I just back up to when we were talking about the multi-year?
Yes.
If that was something, and Corey and I have talked about this before, it doesn't have to be a guarantee that, this is a 2-3 year contract. And we got permission from legal last year that within the Board of Health is able to provide more than 1 year contracts, but even maybe some language in the RFP that there could be there could be potential for the contract to be extended or to be longer or to be automatically renewed. So then that way, if a program, if we know that it needs more than a year of funding, or like crisis hotline, we know it's going to continue to be funded. If we continue to have them apply, can we look at some language in the RFP as far as like an automatic, there's the possibility of an automatic renewal of the contract, or the contract being longer than a year, instead of going through the process of every year having certain agencies apply, knowing that when the next year comes, there's a high possibility they're going to be funded again.
Thoughts for Amy?
I wonder if that's something, is that something that would get hashed out though, and once a contract is awarded, or during that process?
So when I talked to legal about it last year, when we were looking at doing longer than 1 year contracts, it was suggested from legal to kind of put that in the RFP to just be transparent from the beginning. And then Lori, you're correct, then that would be extended throughout the process, and then it could be worded. And I would check the wording with legal, of course, in the contract, but in the contract, it could be worded that the language could include that, you know, and it's like that in other contracts too, like it could be automatically renewed, or it may not be automatically renewed. And so then that gives us the chance to next year, if something changes or there's money is all gone, then it doesn't have to be renewed. But then there's also the chance that it could be renewed instead of having them apply again, going through that process, having board members look at their application again. It's just very time consuming to have every agency in every funding focus area apply every single year. If there's a chance that some of them are going to, like, crisis hotline that's been historically funded for numerous years, to continue to fund them.
So Amy, would the wording be something like this contract is going to be awarded for 1 year with the option of renewal?
Something like that.
that?
I would look at like language. There's the contract that we had with EMK Consult when we were doing the computer programming, the computer software, they had it in their contract where it was like the automatic renewal. So unless we did something or whatever, it just continued to be renewed. But I would talk to, I don't know the exact language, I would talk to legal about what language would keep us safe in that we don't have to renew it, but we also can renew it if the board decides that that's going to be another focus area or another program they want to continue to fund. Like the embedded school projects, we know that, you know, they start it in 1 year. They're not going to be able to sustain that after just 1 year of funding. They're going to need more time, but then we're asking them to take time to do another application to see if they can get funded another year. And that really turns off a lot of the schools in wanting to be committed because they don't know if they're going to be funded another year. And it turns off a lot of agencies not knowing if it's going to live more than a year, where this could be an option of, we're not trapping ourselves into more than a year contract, but it's definitely an option.
So it might be something like contracts will be awarded for 1 year with, and may be extended for beyond that if, depending on available funding and other circumstances. Something very vague. I would want it to be very vague because we really are in no position, especially now, to promise anybody anything.
Yep, exactly, Lori. So then that way it's an option, but it's not an obligation or commitment.
And again, this is the exact conversation we've had every year, you know, that sadly the monies are not so guaranteed that we can be definitive. So I like this idea, but I'm not sure that it still gives an agency a lot of assurance that, you know, they can hire somebody and they can tell that person, you know, you've got a job for more than a year. But it still may be, it might be moving us in the right direction. So I think it should definitely be pursued. Do you all kind of think that's the way we should go with this pursuit?
I would say, I don't know about the language necessarily, but something that says based on performance and on a continued availability of resources. Something that gives us those two outs. If they don't perform, then they're not going to continue. And if we don't have the money. So, I mean, that's pretty straightforward and transparent, I think.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, now I'm going to move us very quickly to, again, thinking about this idea of if we create this function of how we can market to underserved populations. Any ideas about some ways to go about that? I'm just interested in picking your brain about thinking about people you work with that you, you know, have real concerns that they are not, that we are not providing services that are culturally competent or, and just anything and everything. Throw out some ideas about how we might be successful in that marketing function.
This is Gabby from Salvation Army. In the past, we've looked at advertising on the school buses, or not the school buses, but the city bus.
Mhm.
There's panels that you can put information on.
Thank you. Other ideas?
Well, this is Faye. I know we need to broaden, from looking at the information going out to the African American community, I think we need to broaden and identify organizations that, other than the Links and the 100 Black Men. I know a lot of them are in other organizations, but also to the churches, and to broaden the identification of the organizations that have as their mission and to you know, something in mental health as a part of their mission or service area, because then they're committed to having to do that piece for the community.
So do a better job of getting a really good
Specific
listing.
and tight, so that you
listing
don't
of
have to.
organizations and entities
Right.
that, yes,
Mhm.
okay. Okay. And do you have any idea, are there places that you feel like that's already, that maybe there would be a start on that? I mean,
Well,
I
I
know,
know the different Greek organizations
okay,
have their mission for existence is some of the language that would identify them as a requirement to collaborate. And so to look at that as well. And then again, Heartland, because of the population that we serve, would
Mhm.
be some advertisement around and in there as well.
Okay.
Mhm.
Any particular vehicles for the actual tools to get the message out that are other than obviously social media? Is there any other ways that, you know, feel like that would be more engaging?
I was thinking of finding some way to reach the veterans. I know a number of them go to Heartland, but we do have a Veterans Affairs office, I believe, still in town.
This is
Certainly,
Christine.
go ahead.
We're not hearing you, Christine.
Yeah, I agree, Mary. The veterans, we have that new facility that just opened up. Oh no, is that any better?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Hello,
I can hear you.
any better? Okay. Okay, so I agree with Mary, absolutely. We have that new veterans. Okay, we have that new veterans facility that just opened up in Bloomington. So I agree, that's a fantastic place to start. This may sound simplistic, but even places within the community, flow with me here for a second, but even places in the community like local gas stations, churches are huge. I agree with Faye about churches, that they're not only are they a place where individuals meet on a regular basis, but we're talking about a commitment to the community for local churches. As silly as it sounds, I know that at places within the community, like gas stations and other, and I can't think, I don't know why my brain's not working right now, but other places that people frequent regularly, that even leaving flyers and pamphlets at the door. They have coffee shops that they have those boards that we can put up, let's say a Starbucks or something lower than a Starbucks, because nobody can afford Starbucks. Putting up flyers, right? Putting up flyers on the bulletin boards there, offering services or letting people know or be aware about what services are being offered within the community as far as marketing goes. That's not very expensive to be able to send a case manager out in the community and start posting some of these pamphlets or education or awareness about what programs are being offered. I did mention Job Partnership Joy Care earlier. That is a community-based organization in Bloomington Normal that works very closely with the community, that probably has a lot of resources, that ideas that we can reach out to other not-for-profit organizations, and agreeing with Faye saying let's start getting into the community as far as talking about, hey, churches, where do you think are some other places that may benefit from obtaining some of this information? And I know it sounds very simplistic, but sometimes we just need to break it down to the basics.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Christy,
Yeah.
what did you say the name of that partnership was?
It's called Job Partnership Joy Care. And the administrator, or whatever her title is, program coordinator, is Miss Michelle Cook. And Corey, if you want her contact information, just shoot me an email, or I can shoot you her contact information.
Right. That would be great.
Okay, I'll do that.
Another place would be MCLP, and because their request for project proposals kind of matches this year with mental health and COVID, et cetera. So you might even be able to get them to double market for us through projects or whatever. So MCLP and food banks.
And we also have a number of programs in town that provide services to individuals with DUIs. There are 3 or 4 of those, and certainly substance and mental health are tied together for the most part. And you know, we haven't addressed the Hispanic communities, so Western Avenue and St. Mary's Church, they primarily do services for Hispanic population at St. Mary's. And I think maybe we might tap into what they've learned through this United Way effort to Pontiatin, who's tied in with the MCLP program. He might be a really good resource to give us some connections that they've been able to develop, because one of the programs that they developed specifically provides food for undocumented individuals in the community. So, and I'm not sure they call it that, but that's essentially what they've targeted because of their location of where they provide the food and other things. So they may be a really good resource for us to tap into that community better.
Mary, would you send me that contact information as well about the
Yep.
junk?
Sure.
And are we looking at putting multiple languages out, at least in Spanish? And I just heard yesterday, I think, about there an increasing number of people in the community that speak French. And so I don't know which languages, but besides Spanish, that would be important, but I would say at least Spanish.
I would agree with you completely. We have a very large community from the Congo, and they're very much under the radar, but they're here, and they are very close to each other and help each other in many ways. So finding, and they're I know that the one school, what is that called? The one elementary school over by the ISU's campus. Oakdale.
Oakdale. I thought you were thinking
I
about
think
Ben.
it's Oakdale. They said they have like 32 languages or something. I mean, it was this enormous number of languages. How many? 10. My husband corrected me. 10. They have 10 languages spoken in that school, and many of those are different types of French from the Congo. So there are a couple of schools that probably could really get the word out for us.
Yes. Schools is a great way to be their hubs. Yeah.
Feeding off of Mary's idea for reaching veterans, one of the thoughts I had, and this would also help get into some of the small towns in the county and not just stay focused on Bloomington Normal. would be the American Legions and the VFWs that exist in not all of the small towns, but a lot of the outlying towns within the county. Because some of those communities may have a gas station and an American Legion and not much else. And so when the American Legion may do like a Friday night dinner or a Sunday lunch or something like that, it's somewhere where most people in the community do come in that time. So it's reaching the veterans who do go there, but it can also reach other community members in those small towns. I mean, so I'm trying to think through, and knowing that sort of that rural eastern part of the county is one that we know from the data struggles with mental health, and also doesn't have services out there. So
Great idea.
those might be some.
And I know many of you know Sonia Reese. I know she participates in, it's some rural, help me out. She's on some committee that is about rural services. And so we can certainly tap into her and make sure we get it out through all of the members of that committee too, and get input from them to get ideas for this. Thank you so much. Those are great ideas. Any other?
International programs at all the colleges and universities, they are a group that needs to community to reach into for services.
Thank you. Okay, any others? I'm going to do about just a few more minutes, one more minute on this, and then we'll move on to, because again, I'm so sorry I'm taking over. From now on, these meetings are going to be 2 hours long because they are last 2 hours. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, to tag on to Tricia's comment, I live almost to Carlock, and you're absolutely right. There's like these little hubs within those communities that they know each other. I mean, I live on the edge. I don't know them, but they know each other. And much of it is done through their fire departments. So they have their pancake breakfast, they have their socials, they go there, and there's little library systems. So those would be excellent ways to get out into our more rural areas. And I think that's great, the American Legion. That's, and the fire department often is, they're often the place where people go hang out. So yeah, I think we do need to do a lot more reaching out to those rural communities. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. Well, just the little restaurants in communities, because there's usually like one restaurant in every little rural town that's kind of the place where everybody hangs. So that too. Okay, very quickly. If we work on, again, the function of helping agencies, entities become more sustainable, anybody have ideas on who you know in the community that has done a great job with building sustainability that could become like a trainer of trainers, or just any ideas you have about how we could help promote and coach on sustainability?
Well, I think at one point, I mean, probably about a year ago, we talked about possibly bringing in staff from HFS to give guidance to agencies about billing for Medicaid services, and that an outside entity or resource may be advantageous, so that it doesn't feel like competition, and no one has concerns like that, but that someone from HFS may at least be part of the solution. I know that was one of the discussions, at least. So
thank you. Do you have a contact person there, Tricia?
I don't have a direct one, but I can come up with one. I mean,
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other ideas on that?
Yeah, to follow up on that, I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier, but Illinois Wesleyan has the Action Research Center that brings together all the players. I mean, the list on their email that goes out, and they get together and they collaborate. And Deborah Halpern is the coordinator of that. And then the other person whose name is slipping, the two of them work together and pull amazing resources together. And it's not sustainability, but it is certainly collaboration. And it's a free resource to us if we would want to follow up on that as well. And I can if you want it, I can send you her contact information.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. These are great ideas. Other ideas? Okay, that gets us a great place to start. Thank you. So if I can have you just a little bit more, how about, do I have approval of the board minutes from February 7th and the joint meetings from June 4th? Can we do those together? Go ahead, Lori.
I think we need to do them separately. Sorry.
Have to separate, okay.
I'll move that.
Thank you. So you're doing February 7th first? Okay. So all those in favor, oh, I'm sorry, so we have a motion. Do we have a second? Thank you, Trish. Okay, moved in second. Any discussion on the minutes of February 7th? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Raise your
Aye.
hand, please. Oh, wait, can't see your hand. Say, I can't see hands. So there we go. Can I see some more hands here? Maybe it's going to be easy. Maybe it'll be easier if we say those opposed, please show your hands. Okay, looks like they passed. And now do I have a motion for approval of the June 4th joint meeting?
So moved.
Okay, so it looks like we've got Lori and Trish again, moved and seconded. Again, all those in favor, if you can show your hand, please do. Those
think
opposed?
We probably need a
Okay.
voice vote because we can't see people's hands.
Okay, so I guess we'll go around and would everyone please say whether you approve? I guess we need to back up and do the February 7th one as well.
I think we
Probably.
need to do it without an individual vote. I
To
think
do what? I'm sorry, Lori.
without an individual vote, if people just say something.
Okay, yeah, if we would just go around, each of you and just say that you either approve or do not approve the minutes. Thank you, and I'll let each of you take a hand, and let's start with Christine.
I approve. No abstentions.
Okay. Dan, we still can't hear you, sadly. Martha?
Approve.
Dan is actually saying I am, no wait, sorry, that was Gabby. Gabby's saying I. Dan is saying I also on the chat. I know you can't see that, Corey, but he's saying aye.
Somehow we're losing you too, Christine. But thank you for trying. Martha, can you say yes or no, whether you approve?
Yes, I approve.
Thank you. Hey, you raised your hand. Gabby,
Yes.
yes or no?
I approve.
I approve.
Okay, and again, I'm assuming the approval means for minutes of both February 7th and June 4th. If not, I don't know, do we need to go around again for June 4th and say that was the 7th? Probably. All right, so you just approved, those of you that said you approved February 7th. Let's go around again and let's try to be quick with approving June 4th. Okay, and we'll start again with Christine. Somehow we're losing you again, Christine. I'm so sorry. And Dan, let's go with Martha.
Approve.
Faye, raise your hand. Gabby,
I approve both minutes.
for June 4th. Mary, we're not hearing you.
Yeah, I approve.
Thank you. Okay.
Corey, you're muted.
Now, sorry. Okay, those minutes are now approved. So the only thing we have left is the mental health bylaw updates to be approved, and I do not know if we should rush that. I do not want to. I don't know if again, do people feel uncomfortable with trying to do that quickly, or would we move that forward to the next meeting? I do not want to rush something and
Corey, I move that we table it to the next meeting.
okay. And do we have a second on that? Okay, moved and seconded that we table. Do we have to approve that? Does that have to be approved? Okay, so we're going to go around with a voice vote. So all those in favor of tabling to look at the bylaws until our next meeting, please give a voice vote of approve or disapprove. And let's start again with, looks like with Dan, if he can do it. I don't think he can. So we'll go to Martha.
I approve it to table it.
Faye,
I approve.
Lori,
I approve.
Gabby,
I approve.
and Trish, you're a voting member, right? I believe you are. Yes. Trish,
I
yes.
think. But yes, I approve.
Thank you. And Mary, and I think you waited.
I approve.
Okay, so we're tabling that. So any other business to come before this august body that has done a lot of work today? Okay, then I move, do we have a movement for adjournment? Okay, Lori and Trish, I think we can say we're adjourned. Thank you so much. So there was so many good ideas. I look forward to getting these all in good order, and Amy and I will be, and Julie will be making sure the minutes get out to you, and then we will probably want input again on anything else that comes to mind to you. We would certainly welcome it at any time. So thank you so much, everybody, and thank you for giving us an extra half hour. And I think in the future, we probably should just make these meetings 2 hours because we've always gone over. So we might as well be realistic about it if I can always take that much time. So thank you so much, and have a good day and a good weekend.